Hey guys, how you doing? Hope you've been doing good. Now I was going to make one of my reading videos for you this week where I do few more spreads and stuff, but then I got a question which I suppose you can already see on the screen. I got a request to make a video where I talk about breaking down a question so that you can design your own spread. So I'm like, okay, let's break out, let's fire up Keynote and let's get going because that's how we roll. It's been a while since I made one of my Keynote videos. So here we go. Now, the thing is, I've already made a video in the past where I talk about how to choose the right spread for your question. So if you're kind of interested in watching that video, also I will put a link somewhere on the screen so you can click on it and go there after you watch this video. But meanwhile, let's look the other way, okay, and figure out how to break down the question so you can design your own spread. Now, here's the thing, before you begin, before you say, oh yeah, let's do this, let's get into it, let's make our own spreads, please just check and see if a spread doesn't already exist. This is like the number one thing to bear in mind. There are way too many spreads out there. Trust me. You can Google it, you can check on Pinterest, or the best place which gets 5 stars is your Eclectic Tarot forums. There is like an entire section devoted to spreads, talking about spreads, making spreads, discussing spreads. There's just, like I said, way too many spreads out there. And chances are you might just find a spread that works for you. All right. Trust me. When I was learning, I spent a lot of time hanging around lurking on these forums, and I learned a lot by doing that. Okay, not the lurking part, but the learning part. That was very interesting. But then, like I said, sometimes you may not find a spread that you like, or there isn't a spread out there which sort of answers your question. In that case, you're like, okay, you know what? I think I need to make my own spread. And I'm like, go for it. Okay. This sort of thing can happen if your question has a lot of different related questions. So it's like a combination question, or and this is very real. It's like your question is very specific to the issue that your client has. So your client has a very complicated or a deep issue, and that's got many different aspects to it or many different shades to it, and so it's very very specific, very very personal to the client. So of course there's probably no spread about that out there, right? Or if your client has many different variables in play, or I'm sorry, your question has many different variables in play, and so you have to really, and a big macro spread doesn't necessarily cover or look at those different variables. So when a spread isn't enough, really a spread that's already existing isn't enough for your question, that's when you can make your own spread. All right, so let's get down to it. There's very simple process to do that. Step one is to take your question and divide it into its component parts. Now, it may sound very simple, and you're like, hey, come on, that's the whole point. That was my question, how to break it down, and now telling me just go ahead and break it down. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, that is kind of what I'm talking about. But how do you do that? Okay, you have a conversation. Here is the important part. This is where the interaction between you and your client comes into play. This is where you sit down and maybe while you're doing the reading, you sort of talk to your client and try to find out what exactly your client is trying to get at via that question or through that spread. So you really get down to the crux of the matter, right? This is important. This is where you're talking to the client, or you ask the right questions, and you listen to your client and try to find out where he or she is trying to get at. What are they trying to really find out? Okay, chances are you already have a spread then that can deal with that question. Okay, and I'm going to talk about that towards the end. Remind me if I'll put a post-it about it. Okay, but the main part is to understand really what the client is wanting to get at. Then you have more information about the different aspects, right? Through that discussion, you will understand more about really what aspects of the situation the client really wants to get into. Okay, so you get more information about the question and the different angles that you're supposed to sort of look at that question. The different angles from which you're supposed to look at that question, and that's how that sort of helps you break it down into its component parts. Okay, now all that is really very much theoretical, so I'm going to show you how to do that with an example. And this is a very interesting question, a very commonly asked question. What should I do to get this job? Now, the example that I have taken here is actually sort of derived from a real life situation. A client of mine, he went in for a job interview for a job that he really wanted. It wasn't necessarily a dream job, but the pay was good and he needed the money. So he went in for the interview, and then once he got out of the interview, he was a little bit nervous. He's like, maybe I may have done something wrong, or what, I didn't get a good feeling. I'm just very, very nervous. So is there anything else that I should do to get this job? That was his question. Now, usually, I have a go-to sort of path and guidance spread that I rely on, okay, to answer these kind of questions. And this is also like I'm going to take a little sidebar here, and I'm going to talk about this. Have a few questions, or I'm sorry, have a few spreads sort of fixed in you about these, some really strong spreads that sort of look at various angles of different kind of questions. You have your guidance questions, you have your prediction questions, you have your general reading sort of situations. So, like an overall picture thing. So have a few spreads handy, the spreads that, you can even wake up from your sleep and sort of do, without thinking much. Have those kind of spreads and be really 100%, 500%, 10,000% with those spreads. Okay, and so that if whatever kind of question comes, you already sort of have a spread for it. But like I said, previously, if there are various aspects to this issue which you haven't necessarily considered in that macro spread, then you can totally go ahead and make a spread. So this is what I did for my client here. When he came up with this spread, I made a spread for him. Okay, and this is the best technique. I used a technique called mind maps. Now, very simply, if ideally, then you should sit with a notebook and a pen. And in that notebook, just take that question, and as you're talking to your client, right, when you realize I probably need to make a spread here, start writing down all the different things, in little clouds or something, like sketchnoting maybe, and then find the connections, right, and or just take a central thought, and from there you have arrows coming out and different points coming out. Now, getting right into the nitty-gritty of mind maps is not necessarily within the scope of this video. I always wanted to say that, but and I will put a really awesome link for you in the descriptions. But the mind map way of sort of looking at things and trying to figure things out is awesome. I cannot recommend it enough. But and because we are readers, and because we are also very visual people, it really, really works for us. But then there are people who are linear, and for them you have bullet lists. And again, I'm not saying one is better or one is worse. I'm just saying that mind maps and bullet lists can be converted into one another. So really, it's all good. Whatever floats your boat, man, do it. You like a bullet list, make a bullet list. You like a mind map, make a mind map. The point is, the process is not important. What comes out of the process is important. Essentially, you're going to take that question, look at its different angles, aspects, and break it down into its component parts. So let's look at our example and do that, right? So as I said, in our example, the client had already gone in for an interview, and now he was a little bit nervous and wanted to know what he should do to get that job because he really wanted that. So immediately the three angles that sort of came up were: what has he already done, what has he not done, and what he should have done, right, in that interview, right? So let's look at each sort of big component and break that down into its subcomponents. What has he already done? So when he went in for the interview, what did he do? What did he do right? And what did he do wrong? Okay? Because, clearly we need to know where he messed up and where he didn't, where he really shined and or shone or shined. Screw it. What he did right and where he messed up. So from the what has he done part, we can break it down into these two sort of component parts. Now, from what has he not done, so this is what he has not done. So we get really specific, and we ask, so we break it down and say, okay, what does he need to do now? So whatever he has not done, we ask, we are going to break it down and say, okay, so we're going to look at what he needs to do now to fix it or resolve it, because he's not done that. So what does he need to do now? It could be connected with what he did wrong, but it's not necessarily going to be true. But you can sort of look at both these, the connection between both these angles later on. Okay. Now, once he knows what he needs to do to fix or resolve it, you need to know how. Okay. What he has not done, what he needs to fix it, and how can he go and fix it, right? This could be connected with what he should have done. So you can look at both these points also together later on. Now, once he figures out what he needs to do and how he needs to do to sort of fix and resolve what he has not already done or what he should have done, you're like, okay, so what should he be careful about? Because remember, your client was extremely nervous when he came to you. He's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, right? So obviously there's going to be that angle. So you need to reassure him. And of course, you need the extra information also, right? What should he be careful about while he's going and doing all these things that he needs to fix it, resolve it, and all of that? Is there something that he needs to be careful about? And then, of course, the $1,000,000 question: what will be the outcome? Because at the end of this whole thing, he wants to know, well, is it going to work? So, what will be the outcome of his actions? Now, I'm sure those of you and I'm sure all of you are pretty smart, and you've kind of figured out what's going to happen next to this beautiful mind map drawing that's come up on screen. And yep, you're right. The next step is taking that and converting it into a spread position. So each question component becomes a spread position, right? So in our example, if I were to make it like a bullet list, this is how it sort of will look like. You take those questions. Like I said, it mind maps and bullet lists can be converted into one another. So if you were to make a bullet list, this is how it would look like. And these would be your question components converted to, these are your spread positions really. And ta-da! Here you go. This is the same mind map, except instead of, your thought bubbles, you've got cards with these spread positions. Wow. Doesn't it look good? Now, you could leave this as is and you say, okay, here's my spread. I'm going to do this spread and ask the cards. And that question, what should my client do to get that job? I use the spread and we get guidance. Fantastic. You could just use it as it is right here on screen. Fantastic. But then we visual people, we like how things look. So step 3, we design the look of the spread, right? The very, very this is when you're sitting and really working with this newly designed spread that you've created, you can try to make the design or the shape of the spread related to the question. Okay, this way it sort of, it gives the whole look also to the situation of the spread. I mean, that's kind of just a thing you can do. And in our example, here's what I did. I took it and I arranged it or rearranged those cards in a more simple sort of way. And as it animates, you will see this is the sort of look that I went for. It kind of looks like a tick mark, right? Because let's say, like in my head, I was like, okay, tick mark, he'll get the job. Tick mark, we want to know what he wants to do right, as like your symbol for right and wrong, and like X is wrong and tick mark is right. So that's why this whole tick mark symbol sort of happened in my head, and that's how this design came up. But hey, you know what, if you have a better design idea, go right ahead and show it to me. I'm open to ideas, but this is just one way I designed it. Okay, so you can also sit and work with your spread and design the look of it, and make it as symbolically or whatever relatable to the question that it's going to answer. All right, now of course this was just a very brief, a very quick sort of look at things. But there are more resources out there, because if you're in any way like me, you'll be like, okay, this is all great, but is there like more that I can sink my teeth into? Yes, my dearies, there is. First and foremost, this is an awesome book. Okay, Power Tarot. I cannot recommend this book enough. As it says on the cover, it's got more than 100 spreads that give specific answers to your most important questions. Now, this book is like a repository of spreads. It's got spreads like 1 card spread, 2 card spread, 3 card spread, 4 card spread, and so on and so forth. More than that, okay, more than that, this particular book also has card meanings in a very interesting way. This for example, it breaks it down, right? If you were to look at a card and say, okay, how would this look, say, in a romantic situation, or how would this card sort of meaning shape up in, say, a money related situation, or even a spiritual sort of situation, this book has sort of broken down the meaning in that way. So if you're a beginner especially, and if you really take a little, you need a little push to sort of start thinking in those various directions, this card is totally, I'm sorry, this book is totally the go-to resource to have. You can have this book with you when you do readings, right? So you can totally look into it. If you last minute you want to make a spread, or if you say, oh, is there a spread for that, you can look into it. And I believe there's an ebook version also available on Kindle, so you can totally have it on your Kindle or iPad, so you don't have to carry 50,000 books with you. Yeah, I like that. I'm totally happy with this digital revolution. I'm like, way to go. Now, the second book is called Designing Your Own Tarot Spreads by Teresa Michelson. I hope I said that right. Now, the thing is, this book is really where you can totally sink your teeth right into the crux of the matter. This book talks about so many different things about spreads that you may not even have thought about, right? If you want to really, really get into it, about how to go about designing your own tarot spreads, this is the book to really have in your shelf. Sit down and study and work through the exercises and everything. This is like the book to have. And then, of course, you want to take things a little bit further and say, okay, how does this practically apply in a reading? This is the part where I do some shameless self-promotion. So, but here in my book, I do really get into it with the spreads and, using cards. And the fun part here is that while I was writing this book, is that I just, said, okay, how do I pick out which cards go where for, especially when I'm discussing readings and stuff. I just said, forget it. And I just shuffled my deck and pulled out random cards I had that spread in front of me and I just went with that. That's how those spreads happened. I just pulled them out. So those were very real situations and very real spreads that I pulled out, and we'd get into the spreads and the dynamics and the connections and all of that. And so, again, available as paperback and Kindle. I love the digital revolution. Did I say that? I think I already said that. Anyway, the point is, you can totally, but this middle book, the Designing Your Own Tarot Spreads book, if you really want to get into the whole process of it, this is the book to have. Trust me on this, okay? And of course, all of this was sparked, this whole discussion was sparked by this particular deck called the Tarot of, or the Deck of 1,000 Spreads. I believe I don't have this deck, okay? uh, but just based, these are images I got off Google. So but just based on what I see here, I can tell you that this is a good sort of thing to have, especially if you're starting out. You have all these various spread positions, and maybe you can just lay them out, yeah, on your cloth and see, okay, does this spread make sense, what is the connections, what's going on. You can really play with this, right? So I don't know, maybe one of these days I'll just buy this deck, or I'll check it out and see if play with it and see if it makes sense. But you could pull out those cards. I mean, instead of mind mapping, you could look at those cards, maybe take those cards out, whichever ones sort of are related to the question, right? This is how you could do it. You could just look at these, this deck of cards here that's in front of you, and then you have your question, your mind map maybe, and then you say which question relates to which spread position, right? Which aspect of the question really relates to which spread position, and you could pick that out. You could go that way as well, and then you could do something like this, right? Looks pretty, isn't it? Sorry for the grainy image. Like I said, I just got it off of Google. I don't have this particular deck, but it does look promising. Anyhow, here's the part which I'm sure you guys have your own resources as well, a lot of places where you find information. So go right ahead, share them in the comments below, so that other people who come in and watch this video can also look at that. They can share their resources, or they can learn from yours. It's just wonderful. I love the internet. This is how you do it, right? Share your resources. So thank you very, very much for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the like button, okay? And totally follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can internet stalk me. I put out card a day readings on my Instagram, on my Facebook group, and everywhere, Twitter as well. I pull a card every day and I do a reading, except weekends. Weekends are a bit iffy. Sometimes I do one card for Saturday, one card for Sunday. Sometimes I just skip weekends altogether. It all depends on the weather and the mood, and how much stuff I have to do with my mom on the weekend. But yeah, but otherwise during the weekdays I do this card a day reading, and sometimes I do these videos as well. So yep, please hit the like button if you liked it. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, whatever, video requests, post them in the comment section below, and I will try to do my best. All right, thank you very, very much, and have a nice rest of the day, rest of the week, and the rest of the month. Okay, bye bye.